You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. The trial of Derek Chauvin is taking place in the murder of George Floyd. We're in the third week in the final day. The prosecutors called a variety of witnesses, including the brother of George Floyd. Earlier, though, Judge Peter Cahill ruled that Floyd's friend Maurice Hall will not testify. He also turned down a defense request to actually sequester the jury. Here is a roundup of today's testimony.
Do you have an opinion as to whether George Floyd would have lived if not for Mr. Chauvin's subdual and restraint of him for 9 minutes and 29 seconds on the ground?
Yeah.
Overruled. A reasonable degree of medical certainty.
Yes, I believe he would have lived.
What role, if any, do you feel that the fentanyl played in the cause of Mr. Floyd's death?
As far as I can tell from reviewing all of the facts of the case, I see no evidence at all to suggest that a fentanyl overdose caused Mr. Floyd's death.
As cardiologists, do you occasionally have to care for patients who struggle with opioids or opioid addiction?
Absolutely.
So here you found that the fentanyl, in your opinion, played no role in Mr. Floyd's death. Would you tell us why it is you hold that opinion? How do you reach that conclusion?
Well, I think I would break it down to just two major reasonings. Number one, it appeared to me that Mr. Floyd, who was an acknowledged frequent chronic user of substances, particularly opiates, likely developed a high degree of tolerance. There's even one emergency room visit that I had reviewed where he came in and he told the emergency room team that, he was tearful and says, "I'm having trouble with substance abuse. I think he said I took 8 Percocets within 2 hours. He had no side effects from that at all. They observed him for a couple hours and they discharged him. And just so looking through it, looked like he had built up a high tolerance just in general to opiates. But the second, and just as important, maybe more important, was I didn't see any of the signs of an opiate overdose when I reviewed the videos.
So Dr. Rich, then, taking into account all of the evidence that you reviewed, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Mr. Floyd's death was preventable?
Yes, I do.
Would you tell us what that opinion is?
Yes, I believe that Mr. George Floyd's death was absolutely preventable.
You testified that Mr. Floyd, based on your review of the video, did start complaining of shortness of breath prior to being placed in the prone position, right?
Yes, I heard on more than one occasion he say the words, "I can't breathe."
And if Mr. Floyd had simply gotten in the back seat of the squad car, do you think that he would have survived?
Check, Your Honor. It's not calling for medical testimony.
You may give if you have a medical opinion as to that.
Overruled to that extent.
So, had he not been restrained in the way in which he was, I think he would have survived that day. I think he would have gone home or wherever he was going to go had he not been subjected to the prone and positional restraint that he was.
So in other words, if he had gotten in the squad car, he'd be alive.
I think my answer remains the same. Anything other than that scenario that he was subjected to, I have no reason to think from a medical perspective that he would not have survived that day, correct?
Sir, would you please describe this photo and what you know about it?
That's my mother. She's no longer with us right now, but that's my oldest brother, George. Yeah. I miss both of them. I was married. In May 24th, I got married. And my brother was killed May 25th. And my mom died on May 30th. So it's like a bittersweet month because I'm supposed to be happy when that month comes.
Sir, I'm going to ask you some questions about your mom's passing a little bit. If you need a moment, I can take a minute. And just let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. I want to get the thoughts of our panel again on how the prosecution laid this whole thing out. DeLacy, I want to start with you. I can't recall the last time I saw a trial when an officer was on trial, and you had the number of police officers testifying against that cop for the prosecution.
I would agree with you. I think it's rare. My colleague, Sergeant Dorsey, and I, we've been bantering back and forth earlier in the week in this trial about whether or not the police chief's testimony set the tone for the department or gave coverage to others to come forward. But this is one of the rare times in my 20-plus years of seeing this many officers come out against a police officer in this kind of case. So I think that's been great. I'm concerned, to be honest with you, that reasonable doubt has been established. And again, they may hang the jury. I'm just not sure. And I think they began to lay out this argument that somehow George Floyd killed himself. But I agree that this is one of the more aggressive prosecutions that I've seen from a prosecutor in terms of bringing officers forward to make the case.
Cheryl?
I believe that the police chief is still in damage control. They have given the family $27 million to try to assuage them, placate them. Like I said, he knew exactly who Derek Chauvin was. We had heard from the on-scene supervisor who had worked with, supervised Derek Chauvin since 2008. And yet they allowed him to stay on the department with 18 personnel complaints. And so for that, I'm not impressed. But we heard them try to humanize Mr. Floyd and talk about who he was to his friends and to his family. And now next week, it's probably going to be very triggering for a lot of people because the defense is going to do their level best to now put George Floyd on trial. And so we need to remember that George Floyd is not on trial. Derek Chauvin is. And we need to respect his humanity. And had Mr. Chauvin shown some respect for George Floyd, he would be here today.
Reddit?
Absolutely. I agree with everything that I've just heard. I would give the chief maybe a half point more than my colleague Sergeant Dorsey would, because he took the stand and effectively said that, Derek Chauvin murdered this guy. He violated our policies. He violated our morals and ethics, him being aware of those things prior to his statement notwithstanding. But the brother, the attorney, I can't remember his name right now, who has been handling most of the expert witnesses, has been on par excellence, man. I think you can't lay a better foundation for a reasonable jury than he has to establish the fact that Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. And we all saw it on camera. You can believe your eyes. And I'm hopeful, although I have some of the same reservations that Dr. Davis has relative to a conviction. But I'm hopeful that a reasonable jury receiving that evidence is going to send Derek to prison for the rest of his life.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Let's talk about the Derek Chauvin trial. Today was, of course, the day where the defense took their turn trying to defend him. And my God, was it unbelievable to listen to them try to have experts to say that George Floyd essentially killed himself. Here's a roundup of today's testimony.
Wrap up. Could you summarize the final opinions that you have made in this case?
I felt that Officer Chauvin's interactions with Mr. Floyd were following his training, following current practices in policing, and were objectively reasonable.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Are you aware of how the Minneapolis Police Department defines force?
Not specifically, no. I would have a general understanding of it.
Generally, would you agree, or based on your review, would you accept that the Minneapolis Police Department generally defines force to include restraint?
It can.
A reasonable police officer would adhere to the policies of their own department. True?
Yes.
Can you undo your seatbelt, sir? Sir, passenger, can you undo your seatbelt? Go ahead and undo your seatbelt.
Please, I don't want to get shot.
I don't plan on shooting you. I'm just saying, just take your time.
I ain't never seen him.
Okay, relax. Just undo your seatbelt. Let her take care of her guy. Just keep your hands out where I can see him. Hey! Let me... Keep your hands where I can fucking see him. Okay? Put them up on the dash. Put them on the dash. I'm not going to shoot you. Put your hands on the dash. Put your hands on the dash. The last time I'm going to tell you that. It's simple. He keeps moving his hands around. He won't listen to what I have to say.
Put your hands
on your
head.
Put them on your head.
Top of your head. Okay, man. Open your mouth. Spit out what you got. Spit out what you got. I'm going to tase you. Spit it out. He's eating all
Don't you jerk away from me.
Put your hands behind your back. That was one yellow pill, boss.
Okay, now slowly come on out.
Hand under
Put your
hand under head.
Okay, relax then. You're not going to get beat up or nothing. You just follow what we're asking you to do.
I apologize for him, man. I apologize, man. I apologize.
Yeah.
Your attention was focused on Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes, it was.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further?
Well, you woke him up when the police officers walked up, correct?
Yes.
And so then he was awake.
Yes, you just want me to say yes or no, explain what you want me to do.
Well, explain.
I want to explain. Okay, thank you. So he when I tried to wake him up, he woke up the second time. I said, Floyd, the police is here. It's about the $20 bill wasn't real. I kept saying, baby, get up. The police was out. So he looked, and we looked to the right, and he had the police. He tapped on the window with a flashlight. And I'm like, Floyd. And so he turned back around again. He's like, what? And I was like, baby, that's the police. Open the door, roll down the window, whatever he told me to do. So he looked back, and when he seen the man had the gun at the window when we looked back to him. So he instantly grabbed the wheel, and he was like, please don't kill me. Please don't shoot me. What did I do? Just tell me what I did. Please don't kill me. Please don't shoot me. And I'm like, Floyd, baby, it's not. You said explain. I'm trying to explain what state he was in, sir.
I did.
Here's a book, man. Yeah, are you guys good with diesel? I'm gonna double check. Here's the book. Here's a notebook.
You want to get his phone? Yeah. In the car?
Yeah, it's right down. His phone. He's already gone. He doesn't need his phone. Is that his phone? Put his phone back.
Yeah, put his phone back. He's gonna.
He's gone already. He went to the hospital.
Tell him where it is.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Put his phone back. That's it.
You know him, bro?
Yeah.
What's up? You might have called his family or something. I watched the whole thing play out. I ain't even.
What happened?
I didn't talk to them yet. You heard it.
Okay. You ran him though?
Nope.
No, that man took our name.
So, supposedly your partner has his ID.
What happened to him?
Fucked up.
All right.
Ask your partner if your partner needs it in order.
He took your ID?
Yeah. He fucked up.
He said.
They kept his foot on his. They kept it. I already know what happened.
What?
I tried to get him to get in the car. I tried. I told him he can't win. Go on, get in the car. I kept telling him that. Bro, you can't win, bro. Get in the car. Because I know you can't win.
I don't need anything from them.
They're good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, you guys are good.
The two things I don't fuck with it.
Well, he said you two are good, but I'm not too sure about this.
Can I take Sylvia's car?
What?
That's Sylvia's truck. That's our friend Sylvia.
Okay.
Ex-co-worker. Well, let me try. If I get her phone, I can call her and tell her, sir.
Oh, the car's going to stay put right here until we figure it out.
Well, you better lock it because his phone's sitting right there.
Can I tell Sylvia?
Just stay put. My partner's going to come back. I don't know what their plan is with the car.
Hey, you mind if I just get his phone? Okay.
I don't want you guys touching the car.
Once you walked over to the far side of the road, over by the Dragon Walk, you could no longer see what was going on with Mr. Floyd.
Yeah, yes.
You indicated that the crowd was getting louder and more aggressive, correct?
Yes.
And but you knew that there were now 4 officers over at that scene, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so your main focus was on watching those passengers.
Yes, in the car.
And you assumed when you were doing that those 4 officers were okay over there because there were 4 of them, correct?
Yes.
And if they had radioed for help, you would have heard it over your radio.
Yes.
And they never radioed for help, did they?
No.
Benjamin, I don't know what in the hell the defense is trying to lay out. First of all, you put an expert on the stand who has to familiarize themselves with the department's use of force. You might want to say, bruh, read before you get on the stand.
Yeah, that was pretty incoherent. Like, if they were trying to paint a cohesive narrative, I think they failed spectacularly. The one thing that I feel like they were trying to do is to show that this is, I guess they were trying to show that this is kind of the state of mind that George Floyd was in the previous encounter. But at the end of the day, their job is going to be to vilify George Floyd and to put him on trial. And I think they're easing their way into it. And the longer we go into this process, we're going to see them attack George Floyd's character more and more and more. And that's definitely something that I'm not looking forward to having to experience. And I'm sure nobody who saw that video is going to want to see this defense attorney attack George Floyd the way they're gearing up to.
And again, they're going to have to figure out, Kelly, how to penetrate what the prosecution laid out of the previous 2 weeks, especially with their experts that made it perfectly clear it was not drugs that killed George Floyd.
So I was only able to see bits and pieces of the trial today, but one thing that I noticed was they had somebody on the stand testifying how it's possible that he suffered from something called excited delirium. And that was the cause of his death, as opposed to the fact that there was a knee on his neck and he died. And part of that theory is that, quote, suspects may have incoherent, exhibit extraordinary strength, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it felt incredibly racist to imply that an apprehended, incapacitated Black man is still too strong for a trained police officer to control, especially when he was handcuffed on his stomach and in no position to be anything but under the control of Officer Chauvin. So the fact that they are trying to use any theory, chip at anything that the prosecution threw out, to basically dissuade the jury from thinking that he actually died from a knee on his neck. When the video shows it, the experts told you, the witnesses saw it, and anything that the defense has coming down the pike to combat that is really just theory. It is complete conjecture. So as far as I'm concerned, they don't necessarily have a case, but because Chauvin is entitled to a defense, they got to make do with what they have, which is nothing. So hopefully, considering the fact that they do have nothing, he will be convicted the way he should be, the way that I expect him to be, and we can actually get on with possibly moving forward in a positive direction regarding criminal justice and repercussions for bad policing.
Mustafa.
Yeah, I mean, they continue. What they're trying to do is to get one juror to have that reasonable doubt, and that's their whole game plan. But every one of the jurors have seen the video, and they've seen that George Floyd had his hands behind his back, handcuffed. He's on the ground, and he died from asphyxiation, and the asphyxiation came from Derek Chauvin placing his knee for a considerable amount of time. He didn't have a gun. He didn't have any weapons. He wasn't even resisting arrest. So their case is flimsy, but we also know how the court system works, and they're trying to get that one person. We just hope that every one of those jurors actually uses their minds, uses their hearts, and embraces the humanity that is supposed to be a part of the process.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have, you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it. Please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Folks, again, today, more testimony by the defense put on in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Here is a roundup of what took place today in the courtroom.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You understand, Mr. Hall, you do have a Fifth Amendment right not to be compelled to incriminate yourself. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. And you understand that applies even when you are not one of the parties to the case, but when you're a witness in a trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand that your attorney, and I'm sure they have given you advice about whether to invoke your Fifth Amendment right against compelled self-incrimination. But ultimately, it's your choice. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right, and you'll have to speak up just a little bit, and I'll turn up the podium. There we go. You understand this is your choice, so you could disregard the advice of your attorneys if you wanted to.
Yes, sir.
Knowing all that, you've had a chance to look at the questions that were proposed by both sides?
I have.
Would you be willing to answer those if I were to put you on the stand and swear you in as a witness?
No, I am not.
Okay, and why would you not answer those?
I'm fearful of criminal charges going forward. I have open charges that's not settled yet of my personal stuff.
So basically you are invoking your Fifth Amendment right against compelled self-incrimination?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. You can have a seat.
Did you form, in your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what you thought was the principal cause of Mr. Floyd's death?
Yes.
And what is that?
Cardiac arrhythmia due to hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease during restraint.
Are you suggesting that though Mr. Floyd may have been in cardiac arrest, there was a time when he may have been revived because he wasn't dead yet?
Immediate medical attention for a person who's gone into cardiac arrest may well reverse that process, yes.
Do you feel that Mr. Floyd should have been given immediate emergency attention to try to reverse the cardiac arrest?
As a physician, I would agree.
Are you critical of the fact that he wasn't given immediate emergency care when he went into cardiac arrest?
Yeah, as a physician, I would agree.
How would you classify the manner of death?
So this is one of those cases where you have so many conflicting different manners. The carbon monoxide would usually be classified as an accident, although somebody was holding him there. So some people would say you could elevate that to a homicide. You've got the drugs on board. In most circumstances, in most jurisdictions, a drug intoxication would be considered to be an accident. He's got significant natural disease, certainly the heart, paraganglionoma. You can certainly consider it as a potential exacerbating process, but I wouldn't put it at the top of the list there. So he's got a mixture of that. And then he's in a situation where he's been restrained in a very stressful situation, and that increased his fight and flight type reaction, and that would, during restraint, would be considered a homicide. And you put all of those together, it's very difficult to say which of those is the most accurate. So I would fall back to undetermined in this particular case.
Of course, that former medical examiner out of Maryland, and a lot of folks were talking, Monique, about his prior cases and some issues that some of his rulings in cases out of Maryland that were also troublesome.
Yeah, and then he wasn't successful. I mean, every time if there's any good omen whatsoever, when he comes in, he says something that seems completely lacking in basis or the biggest stretch possible, and then we finally get a conviction. So today was no different. And you see, I mean, he folded under cross-examination. So even if he's stretching and talking about these comorbidities and pre-existing conditions and et cetera and so on, it was still very obvious that he had to say that it happened when under restraint by police. And then under cross-examination, he had to concede that if they had stopped killing him and started trying to treat him, he had a chance to live.
Scott, 30 seconds. Robert, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I disagree with Monique. I think he was thoughtful, whether you like what he said or not. He did the FBI role to the jury. He was quite credible. And his conclusion that you couldn't determine what the cause of death was is more than enough to raise reasonable doubt on the minds of the jury. We'll have to see how the jury votes based on his testimony.
Robert,
I understand that expert witnesses in many cases. Often you can buy an expert to say whatever you feel like that expert needs to say. That's one of the parts of the judicial system that need to be reworked between forensic experts and expert witnesses. You can basically shop around and find someone to say exactly what you need to say to prove your case on either side.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends, go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
In Minneapolis, a lot of things happening in court today. Main thing, Derek Chauvin, the ex-cop who killed George Floyd, chose not to take the stand to testify in his case. He played the Fifth Amendment. Here's the video.
Mr. Chauvin, you and I have had several discussions throughout the course of my representation of you relevant to your right to testify or to choose to remain silent, correct?
That's correct.
And during the course of our representation, it's fair to say that you and I have had this conversation multiple times, correct?
Correct.
You understand that you have a Fifth Amendment privilege to remain silent. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand that if you choose to exercise that right to remain silent, neither the state nor the court can comment on your silence as a sign or an indication of your guilt. Meaning they can't say, he didn't get up and defend himself, so equate your silence with guilt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. Now, you also understand that you can waive that right and testify. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
You understand that if you chose not to testify, or if you did in fact testify, you would be subject to cross-examination by the state of Minnesota.
Yes.
You understand that if you were cross-examined by the state, we could not attempt to limit the scope of your testimony. The state would be given broad latitude to ask you questions. Do you understand that?
Yes.
We've had this conversation repeatedly, correct?
Correct.
I have repeatedly advised you that this is your decision and your decision alone, right?
Correct.
I have advised you, and we have gone back and forth on the matter, would be kind of an understatement, right?
Yes, it is.
But after a lengthy meeting last night, we had some further discussion, agreed?
Correct.
And have you made a decision today whether you intend to testify or whether you intend to invoke your Fifth Amendment privilege?
I will invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege today.
Mr. Chauvin, I'm going to address you directly because the decision whether or not to testify, take this off, is entirely yours. In other words, it's a personal right. Mr. Nelson makes a lot of the decisions in trial, but one he cannot make for you is whether or not you testify. And he can give you advice, and you can take that advice or reject that advice. But the decision ultimately has to be yours and not his. Is this your decision not to testify?
It is, Your Honor.
All right. Do you have any questions about your right to remain silent or to testify on your own behalf?
Not at this time, I don't.
All right. Does anyone promise anything or threaten you in any way to keep you from testifying?
No promises or threats, Your Honor.
And so in other words, as to the statement that his carboxyhemoglobin could have increased by 10 to 18%, in your view, that's not possible.
It's simply wrong.
And it was at most 2%.
At most 2%.
Normal.
Which is normal.
All right, folks. So again, Derek Chauvin choosing not to take the stand. Let's go to my panel. Greg Carr, who is the chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Brittany Lewis, she's a political analyst. Amisha Cross, political analyst, Democratic strategist. First of all, I'll start with you, Brittany. Jury is going to soon get this. Is it any shock Derek Chauvin chose not to take the stand?
I mean, I'm not surprised that he didn't take the stand. I think that it's very clear that would have been the final nail in his coffin. I think that the persecution has done a good job laying him all the way out, quite frankly. Jerry Blackwell has been great dismantling everything that's been put forth. And I think that would also, had he taken a stand, I think there would also have been an opportunity for them to talk about his previous record. And we know that this isn't his first instance of police brutality. So, either way, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. I'm not surprised whatsoever.
Amisha.
I agree with Brittany there, because at the end of the day, I never had any expectation that Derek Chauvin would take the stand. One, he would be facing what he's faced thus far in terms of a prosecution that not only did their homework, but presented a very strong case against him. But also, I think that his lawyer knew what the general public does not necessarily. In preparation for this, they've probably gone back and forth just in case he was to decide to take it. And at the end of the day, this is someone who does not come across remorseful in any way. I think that his posturing would have caused a greater trouble for him, even if he had decided to take the stand. He's not somebody who comes off remorseful. He's not someone who has any level of regret. He's also someone who, because he has so many instances of police brutality that are documented cases in terms of the folks who filed claims against him, at this point, there was no way to get away from that. And if he got on the stand and was argumentative, if he got on the stand and tried to make light of those situations, I think that it would have hurt him in the end. So to his part, I think it was actually smart for him to sit this one out, because he's the one who has his back up against the wall right now. And I don't think that him testifying would have provided any bit of help for his situation.
Dr. Greg Carr, your assessment of where this trial stands.
I agree. I think that I would like to know, and I expect that we will all find out whenever he does his tell-all book, since he's never told his story publicly, and I'm sure that that's the first time most of us have ever heard his little voice. I would like to know what the conversation was between him and his lawyer, between him and Nelson. Which one of them said you should testify, and which one said no. Remember, the defense theory is very basic. It's 4 words. Well, no, it's not even 4 words. What we've seen over the last couple of days is 4 words, the battle of the experts. This is when the eyes glaze over. Anyone watching this thinking we're tracing it through logic or strength of arguments, please understand the defense strategy is very basic. George Floyd was not human. This human being faced a wall of savages in a jungle and had no course to resort to except his training, which was to preserve his human life and protect humanity from the threat. So it doesn't matter whether or not, as we saw Dr. Tobin eviscerate that fool David Fowler, who is currently one of the people being sued by the family of Anton Black here in Maryland, because he is known as a bag man for the police in terms of being a medical examiner. It doesn't matter whether that theory of CO2 or heart defect or heart disease or drugs, it doesn't matter whether that's factually accurate or not. The defense has a basic objective. We must get one of these jurors who will be sequestered beginning Monday, one of these jurors who are now going home to see escalating protests in Brooklyn Park, one of these jurors to look at Derek Chauvin and say, I understand. White power. You had to do what you did. And I don't give a damn what these other 11 say. You, sir, are not guilty. And that's the 2 words it's going to come down to: reasonable doubt. Him keeping his mouth shut, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best possible strategy, because there's nothing he can say or needs to say to that one juror who's sitting over there like, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you.
Well, that was certainly the case. And boy, Brittany, how nuts was it, this whole carbon monoxide That's what killed George Floyd.
I have to laugh because it was just so. Dr. Fowler was reaching for straws and coming up with speculative and wild theories. This man really had the audacity to every other possible scenario but Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck as the reason that killed him. And carbon monoxide, he even admitted that they didn't test, well, he said it on the stand, that, they didn't test for carbon monoxide. So how is it possible that you can even make that claim? And even if we are to entertain that foolishness, if it was death by carbon monoxide poisoning from the exhaust pipe, who put George Floyd in the position to be forced to inhale the deadly gas in the first place? It's foolishness, Roland.
I just couldn't help but laugh at that one, Amisha. And then who was the one who put George Floyd on the ground to be right next to the pipe? Derek Chauvin.
You're absolutely right. Like, it came out of nowhere. It was something that wasn't presented beforehand at all because it was completely irrelevant. It was also an instance where there is no proof to show that the motor was still running or that the car was on at all. So nobody actually knows. But in addition to that, from the autopsy and all the medical reports, there is no evidence that showcases that this was a cause of death. This was a last-minute throw-in, the same as it was when there was an argument that apparently the same doctor found that George Floyd was not actually in pain. So let's just believe that he was laying on the pavement chilling, according to that doctor or that expert, that there was nothing, there was nothing out of the ordinary here and that this was normal protocol. There was so much going wrong with that testimony. And I think that just, the fact that he was able to throw in some things that he couldn't draw a linear direction towards. And we have to be clear about this. He never actually said that carbon monoxide was the cause. What he did was go down this listing of how it could be a contributing factor, not really knowing whether it was or not, but also planting that seed to Dr. Carr's point, planting that seed in the heads of a juror, a potential juror, somebody who already is probably thinking, well, maybe this was not Derek Chauvin's fault, trying to find a way to weasel in their head to get this man off. And I think that, to that extent, that specific witness provided that leveraging point for him.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have, you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.